My name is Jordan,
I'm Dusty.
and we're going to do our presentation over periodization.
Periodization varies intensity and volume of resistance training. There are two goals of periodization. Goal 1 is to maximize neuromuscular response, such as gains in overall strength, endurance, power, and hypertrophy, or the increase in muscle size. Goal 2 is to minimize overtraining and injury by planning rest and recovery. This is also more effective for gains in 1RM.
Things you can manipulate in periodization are the volume, as in the number of sets, reps, or different exercises, the intensity, as in the amount of resistance, or the type of muscle action, whether it be concentric, eccentric, isometric. You can also manipulate the frequency of training sessions.
There are three models of periodization. There's the linear model of periodization, the reverse linear periodization, and the undulating periodization.
So first we're going to talk about the linear periodization model. It's broken down into 3 cycles. There's the macro cycle, which is 9 to 12 months, and then that is divided in the mesocycle, which is 3 to 4 months, and then in each mesocycle there's microcycles, which is 1 to 4 weeks. Within each cycle and also between every cycle, intensity and volume decreases. So, for example, the example that the book gives is during weeks 1 through 4, you'll perform 3 sets of 70% your 1 rep max for 12 reps. Weeks 5 through 8, you'll perform 3 sets again, but intensity increases to 75% of your 1 rep max, and the number of repetitions drops down to 10. Weeks 9 through 12, you'll perform 3 sets with an intensity at 80% your 1 rep max for 8 reps.
The next one we'll talk about is reverse linear periodization model. This reverses the progression of the LP training stimulus. In this model, between and within cycles, intensity decreases as volume increases. For example, weeks 1 through 4, there are 3 sets at 80% of your 1 rep max. For weeks 5 through 8, there are 3 sets at 75% of your 1 rep max for 10 reps. And 9 through 12, there are 3 sets at 70% for 12 reps. The intensity decreased as the volume increased from 8 reps to 12.
The last model we're going to talk about is the undulating periodization model. In this model, the microcycles are shorter compared to the previous 2 models. It can be changed bi-weekly, weekly, or daily. This keeps the intensity and the volume changing frequently. This subjects the exercising muscles to different training stimuli, often in order to prevent plateaus during training, and keeps the client engaged and motivated in long-term resistance training.
Next, we're going to talk about the circuit and resistance training. The circuit training resistance program is usually performed 3 days a week for at least 6 weeks, so it is ideal for clients who don't have much time for working out. It has usually about 10 to 15 stations per circuit. It is repeated 2 or 3 times, so the exercise is continuous for about 20 to 30 minutes. At each station, you select a resistance that will reach your muscle fatigue in about 30 seconds by doing so many reps as possible at 40 to 50% of your 1 rep max. There is also 15 to 20 second rest included between each station. Circuit resistance training is used to increase strength, muscle endurance, and cardiorespiratory endurance. It resembles traditional resistance training by using high resistance and low repetitions in order to increase muscle strength in untrained adults. It can be effective for increasing muscular strength of adults between the age of 18 and 65. High resistance training is also effective in training 1 rep max strength and power for upper and lower body in resistance trained men. To gain additional cardiorespiratory benefits, you can add aerobic stations between each weightlifting station.
So next is eccentric training. Eccentric training can improve strength, hypertrophy, and performance, as well as help with muscle and tendon injury and rehabilitation. Many devices have been created for eccentric training. For example, this one is called the Ecentron. That's the one that the book gives. Whenever you are using this machine, the pedals are moving forward while you're kind of like resisting the pedals, so it simulates walking or running downhill. This type of machine is especially good for rehabilitation purposes because it produces high force production at low energy cost. Working out with progressive protocols of moderate load eccentric training can also prevent delayed onset muscle soreness.
Next, we talk about the core stability and functional training. Core stability is the ability to maintain the ideal alignment of the neck, spine, scapulae, and pelvis while performing a skill or exercise. Exercising on an unstable surface like a wobble board, a balance disc, or a Swiss ball is ideal in optimizing limb and core muscles, but can reduce range of motion, force, and power. There are 4 types of training programs included in the functional training programs. There's spinal stabilization, proprioception and balance exercises to enhance your neuromuscular coordination. There's resistance exercises to develop muscular fitness, and flexibility exercises to regain range of motion. Traditional isokinetic exercises that involve only concentric muscle actions may not be the best option for you. The best method of hypertrophy is eccentric muscle action performed at a vast velocity.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about extreme conditioning program. CrossFit, P90X, and Insanity are all good examples of extreme conditioning program. This typically consists of high intensity and volume activities with short recovery periods and emphasize multi-joint exercises, functional movements, body resistance, and variety to target multiple joint angles. There isn't much peer-reviewed research to compare extreme functional training and traditional resistance training, although one study did conclude that those who participate in CrossFit would most likely come back or continue to working out just due to like enjoyment and the atmosphere and everything. One problem with programs like these is it doesn't consider or teach much form when performing stuff like this, so traditional resistance training with a personal trainer is the best way for beginners to avoid injuries.
Next, we're going to talk about isokinetic training. Isokinetic training combines dynamic and static exercise. It is used to increase strength, power, and muscular endurance. Isokinetic training involves dynamic shortening contractions of the muscle group against an accommodating resistance that matches the force through the entire range of motion. The effect of this type of training is greater when training at faster speeds as compared to slower speeds. Since the muscles do not contract eccentrically, there is little to no muscle soreness when performing traditional isokinetic training. If your goal is to increase muscle size, traditional isokinetic exercise that involves only concentric muscle actions may not be the best for you. The best method for hypertrophy is eccentric muscle action performed at a fast velocity.
Next, we're going to talk about developing resistance training programs. When making a resistance program for a client, it should be very individualized and specific to each person. You can accommodate each person's goals and needs by altering the intensity, the duration, and the frequency of the exercise. So first, what you want to do is you want to consult your client, determine their goals, whether they want strength, to improve their muscle endurance, muscle toning, anything like that, and how much time they're willing to commit to the program. Next, what you want to do is determine the type of resistance training program that you're going to prescribe to them, whether it be dynamic, static, isokinetic based on their goals, time commitment, and how much access they have to like what equipment. Next, what you want to do is identify specific muscle groups that need to be targeted to reach their goals. Then you want to select exercises for the muscle groups determined in the previous step using results from their muscular fitness assessment given to them at the beginning before doing all this. For new weightlifters, you want to order the exercises so the same muscle group is not exercised consecutively. You don't want to overwork the same muscle groups multiple days in a row. Based on their goal, you want to determine the starting load, starting reps, and starting sets for each exercise. And lastly, you want to set guidelines for progressive overload for each muscle group to make room for improvement.
Now we're going to talk about the application of training principles. Specificity principle is the first one we'll talk about. It's making programs specific for the muscle groups being exercised, the type of action, and training intensity.
Next, we're going to talk about the overload principle. This is to promote strength and endurance gains. Exercise at workloads that are greater than normal. Intensity should be at least 60% of your maximum to stimulate strength development, although 80 to 100% is ideal when achieving strength gains more rapidly. For endurance gains, as little as 30% of your max can be used, but it should be exercised until fatigued.
With the progression principle, this is gradual progression increasing the volume or total amount of work that is performed to continue overloading muscle to make improvements in strength and muscular endurance. Doing too much too soon can cause injuries and excessive soreness. You can vary rest periods after alter speeds and increase reps to increase progression.
Lastly, we're going to discuss other additional principles. This includes things like the principles of initial values and inter-individual variability, the principle of diminishing returns, things like that. So the principles of initial values and inter-individual variability is the idea that people with low initial strength will show greater relative gains faster than those starting out with higher strength levels because there's like more room for improvement there. Next is the principle of diminishing returns, which is the rate of improvement slows and eventually plateaus as the client progresses through the program, so you need to change things up so they don't hit that plateau and that they're not seeing any gains. Also, when they stop resistance training, the physiological adaptations and improvements in muscle structure and function are reversed. And I think this is the principle of reversibility, and I believe it says that it takes as little as 2 months to lose some of the gains that you have made, no matter how long you've been working out. So that's kind of sad. Periodization techniques lessens the effect of detraining and maintains strength gains during competition periods by manipulating the intensity and volume of resistance training exercise. And that's the end.
That's it.
Thank you, everybody. You're so kind.